Twitch stream for January 16th, 2019. My name is Andrew Turley, and today I'm going to spend some more time working on my Twitch IRC bot in Pony. So this is kind of a continuation of something that I've been doing on here, and the basic idea is that we have built a Twitch bot in Pony from scratch. So Pony is a actor-based programming language that is really good for writing things like servers, clients, networked applications, things that are event-driven. And so an IRC bot seemed like a pretty good way to demonstrate some of the things that Pony does well. So last week we just spent a little bit of time kind of trying to pull apart some of the logic that handles IRC messages and then does things with them. So we ended up creating this IRC message responder primitive that lets us handle different kinds of messages. I guess in this case right now we're only handling private messages, but we have kind of a start for how we might want to try to add other kinds of messages. So let's see here. A primitive is basically a container that holds functions. It's kind of like an object, but there's no state. And so you can kind of use it as a namespace in a way. You can also pass primitives around like objects, and so if you want to encapsulate a bunch of your own functionality in one place, you could stick it all inside the primitive, and it's almost like a singleton in that there's only ever one of them, but you never have to explicitly create it. It's just created by the runtime for you. So let's clean a few things up first. So what am I looking at here? So the idea was to have logic out here in this IRC message responder rather than trying to embed it in the inside the notification handler itself. So inside the notification handler, we have this process message method that takes a string, which is the message that we get from the server, and it pulls this apart and does some things to it. And then it checks to see what type of message it is and sends it off to the appropriate IRC responder functions. So if we wanted to, I guess the first thing, let's clean this up a little. So what we've been doing is we had been calling split on the message itself and splitting it into parts, and the parts were delineated by spaces. So let's take a look at an IRC message. So there's an RFC 1459 that actually describes the IRC protocol. If you've ever looked at this, it's a little bit of a, I wouldn't exactly say a mess, but it's a little, it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to figure out what's supposed to be going on. But here's the message format in sudo BNF. So a message starts with a colon, then there's a prefix, then there's a space, then there's a command, parameters, and a carriage return line feed. So if we, let's just take a look. Let's fire this thing up and send ourselves a message, and we can look in the debugging output to see what these different parts are. So actually, here's the output from the last time I was running this. So if we look, here's our colon, and then this thing here is the prefix that they talk about, and then there's the space, and then there's the command and the parameters. So the command in this case was a private message, and the parameters are here, and then there's a carriage return new line, so new line. So trying to remember if, let's see here. Yeah, so if we look at this prefix, we've got the server name, or the nickname, and then the user, and then potentially a host, so that there's some things in here. Then the params, we've basically got this colon trailing or middle and params. So basically what this means is that you can have some number of parameters, and then you can have a colon, and everything after that is considered kind of a final parameter. So let's see if maybe we can clean this parsing up just a little bit and make this thing a little bit nicer. So I guess the first thing to do is let's look for the prefix and see if we have one. So we got our message in. And so let's see if first character in our message is a colon. And if so, then we're going to say that let's find the end of the prefix. So that'll be the space at the end of this, or not at the end of the message, but the first space in the message, basically. So we'll do a, what is it? So I'm gonna look in here. Actually, let's do this kind of the right way. We'll look in the Pony standard library. So if you go to stdlib.ponylang.io, you'll find the standard library documentation. So strings are in the built-in package. This is the package that's available to you without having to import anything. And we'll click on string. And what we want is find, I think. Yeah. So we'll call find. So this says that it'll return the index of the nth instance of the string starting from the beginning, or raise an error if there is no nth index or if the string is empty. So for now, let's say that prefix is just an empty string if there isn't one. We can probably do a little better than that at some point, but for now, let's do an empty string. So we put our find here inside a try block. And so if it fails, we're just going to return the empty string. And then we're going to say, so from this thing, we want to return substring of MSG from 1 to end prefix. Let's look at substring. Trying to remember if it's exclusive or inclusive. Yeah, half open. So that should give us everything up to just before prefix, excluding the first colon. So let's see here, substring returns a string ISO. What we're probably going to want is a string val. So we're going to do this. Strings in Pony are interesting. I think I've talked about this before. If we, here, quick digression, let's take a look at the definition of string. So class val string. What this means is that if you use string as a type in your code, then it will actually be string val. It'll be have a reference capability of val. Normally classes, if you use them as types in your code, they'll have a reference capability of ref. So we don't need to specify the val reference capability here because that's already assumed by the fact that we've said string. If we wanted a different reference capability, then we could specify that. So this gives us our prefix, and then let's I'm gonna separate this stuff out. Let's do something like this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create something called rest. And so as we move through this thing, we're going to chomp off pieces of rest. I think this will make it a little easier to kind of follow what's going on. So I'm going to return Okay, so what's happening here is we have this if expression. So in Pony, everything is an expression, and so it actually has a result. And the last thing, the last expression in an expression is basically the return value of that expression. So you can think of this if here, as long as everything goes correctly and we don't error out of this try block, then we'll return two strings, the rest substring here, and then I guess the rest substring and prefix. So this returns everything before that first space and then everything after that first space. Otherwise, it returns an empty string and its original value. And we put these two values inside parentheses. So this is a tuple, depending on your preference. And then this assignment actually destructures the tuple and assigns the two parts of the tuple to these two things. So we get prefix and we get rest here. So let's see here. Okay, so now we've got our prefix, and then the next thing we're going to get is the command, and yeah, this is kind of pseudo BNF. I guess this is valid. Okay, I was trying to figure out where they listed the space for params. So they've got params starting with a space. Anyway, whatever. Command here is basically the next thing up until the next space. So we're going to say let command string rest equals. So again, if we look back at what we've got here, the command that says that you've got a message is this priv message. We can find other commands here. So for example, when you connect to or when you join a channel, you get feedback like this. And what this does is there's this, so here's our prefix, famousmred.tmi.twitch.tv. Here's our command, 353. So I'm sure there's some sort of explanation for it, but some of the commands in IRC are things like priv message, which are sort of human readable. Others are just done as command codes. So if we go back to the spec, we should be able to find 353. And that's reply name. So if you join a channel, it'll start sending you a list of names of users that are in that channel. And then at the end, it will give you the end of the list with a 366. So anyway, we're going to just go back up to where we were. Basically what we want to do is we want to extract this next part, which is the command. So it can be basically some letters or some numbers. And I don't care too much about what it is. Let's see here. Really, all I care about is where it starts and ends. So let's do same thing basically here. Let int command equal rest find space and rest substring 0 end command rest substring end command +1. And in the unlikely event that we don't find a space, I guess we should probably just return rest and an empty string. So that would assume basically that everything after that point was command, that we didn't have any parameters. I'm not sure that can happen. Maybe, I guess conceivably it could, yeah. Although this would seem to indicate there would always be a space. So, I don't know. Let's maybe not take this pseudo BNF too seriously, but okay, so that should give us the command now. And then let's see here. So now we've got rest. Let's grab what can we do here? So basically at this point, we're gonna have something that looks like something like this. So I think we could do something like so let's look for the colon. Okay, I guess these things can contain colons. These middle parts. So we can't just look for the colon. I guess we could say let's make this an array of strings. And we'll have a while loop. So we'll say if rest zero equals colon, then params push rest substring 1. And break out of the while loop. Else let's see here. Otherwise, we just want the next thing up to the next space. So otherwise, let's see here. Otherwise, we're going to get the space. And we're going to say, we're going to push the first part into the params list, and we're going to say that rest equals param end plus 1. And so, like I said, this will keep just kind of chomping off pieces of the list, and then we can say, so let's print this stuff out. Command. Before that, we had prefix. And then we're gonna print out the values. Okay, so this should parse the thing up for us. Let's not change anything else. Let's just put this in here for now and make sure that it's working correctly. Hey Chris, I just saw that you were waving at me. Hello to you. Syntax error, unterminated try. So somewhere along the line I put in a try and I didn't have an end. Line 75 and line 79 expected terminating end before here. So let's see what I did wrong. gotta try. Got an else. Oh, yes. I need to at least stick those in parentheses. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, right side must be a subtype of left. Okay, sorry. Right side must be a subtype of left side. None-val is not a subtype of string-val. String-val, supertype is a tuple. So, somewhere along the line it thinks that a result here could be none. Result here on line 64. So what are we doing? 64. Oh. Guess we really need another else here, and this. So if, so this else here is catching the situation where we didn't find a space. This else here is catching the situation where there's not a colon at the beginning of the line. So without that, basically, if the if statement, if the conditional had been false, then there would have been no value. The expression wouldn't have had a result, which means it would have been none. And so we couldn't assign a none to, we couldn't use this destructuring on the none. This expects a tuple with two strings, and it wouldn't have gotten that. So that's what it's complaining about. And 77 couldn't find subtring. Hey Polo, my cat has decided to visit. There he is, back on the blanket for a minute. Okay, let's try this again. Polo, why don't you sit down for everybody? Let them see how handsome you are. Okay, that compiled. Let's try running it. Okay, so I'm getting some debug output here. This is all looking promising, maybe? Yeah, I'm getting my prefix command params. So if I say hello to Mr. Ed, anything happen? Okay, so I'm sending messages and I'm not seeing anything here. What might have happened? So I also should have gotten my... Mr. Ed should have said Wilbur when he joined the channel, which he didn't. So did I break something here? Let's see what we've got. Cat is very interested in whatever's going on the keyboard. Hey, can you look up at the camera? Oh. Or go down to the floor. All right, why would that not be happening? There is a 366. I'm not seeing a debug message about finding a 366. Okay, so I'm wondering if I'm getting an error and exiting before before it can print anything. So it's printing out the received data. But it's not telling me what it got. So somewhere here, I'm probably erroring out. Anything weird here? Or maybe I'm stuck in an infinite loop. My computer seems to be overheating, which could indicate an infinite loop. So I'm going to print out whatever it thinks rest is, and we should see, yeah, doesn't like that. Okay. What did I do wrong? Okay. I'm looking for a space, which there is not a space at the end. So basically, we should I'm going to do this. This should work. Probably even get rid of these. Get rid of these breaks by just emptying out rest. Okay. So can't use an undefined variable in expression, line 96. Oh. Right. Okay. Let's restructure this a little bit. Like that. And I'm calling param.push, and I should be calling params.push. Okay, there it is. We got our Wilbur message in the chat room. I'm going to say hello to famous Mr. Ed, and he'll say hello there. Okay. All right. So that all works. So I think what I want to do is rewrite the part down here to be a little, to use the things that we got here. So rather than splitting things into parts, I'm gonna say if command equals 266, else this. And then for my proof message, I think what I want here is param 0. And then here I want param 1. It's params. Param. Okay. So let's build that. Try it again. Mr. Ed logs in. He says Wilbur. You say hello, famous Mr. Ed. He says hello there. Okay. Great. All right. So this is kind of coming together bit by bit a little better. So let's think about one of the other decisions that we made last time, which is that our commands, our command handlers return strings, and then we decide whether we want to print those strings out or not. I think so let me give an example of something that we could do that wouldn't necessarily work here. If we wanted to have the famous Mr. Ed take a command and do something asynchronously and come back with an answer, or even more basic, let's say that we wanted the famous Mr. Ed to keep a timer. So we wanted to be able to say, timer 10, and in 10 seconds, famous Mr. Ed would come back and say, hey, your timer's up. We wouldn't have any access to the connection when we tried to basically do that asynchronous thing, because we don't get anything passed to us. So we'd want some mechanism for writing something back. And this is where we start getting into some ideas with actors and some ideas about, okay, how do we want to represent this IRC thing that we have, and how do we want to expose that to potentially a user. So for now, let's do maybe the simplest thing. Let's just pass the connection as the first argument, and for now we'll make the message handler responsible for sending things if it wants to. So we won't return anything here. Just do that. And get rid of this. Okay, let's rebuild. Yeah, haven't screwed anything up too badly. Say hello again. He says hello back. Okay. All right. So yeah, we're still just kind of piecing little bits together. While we're in here, since we know that our commands are always strings, let's just turn this into a match. This will make it a little bit cleaner. Can move this into here. Okay. Oops. I left a then in there. Need to get rid of that. Okay. So this is all looking kind of interesting. I think at this point we're close to kind of being able to carve some of this out and basically have a reusable piece that somebody could use to kind of build their own generic IRC bot system. Let's maybe take a little bit closer of a look at how we might do that. So let's just keep this super simple. I'm going to say that there's an interface called IRC message responder. I'm going to change this to my IRC message responder. And I'm going to say that this interface takes, or that anything implementing this interface has to implement this function. So now I can say that there is an IRC message responder in here. So this is the constructor for the Twitch chat connection notify class. So it's going to get an IRC message responder, and it is going to do that. And let's see here. Then I'm going to use that IRC message responder. So instead of hard coding this IRC message responder here, this will use whatever object we pass in. And let's see, I'm going to make this a class ISO. Okay. I'm moving this thing over to a new line here. This is kind of the pony convention. If your function signature is more than one line long, you put the arrow at on a new line in line with the beginning column of your function definition or function signature. Anyway, no, and I want to so let's see here. Actually, I want this to be an ISO. I don't necessarily want the rest of these to be ISO. So do this. And then down here, put that in there. Okay, can't find declaration of underscore IRC message responder. What did I do wrong? I misspelled responder. Okay, I think the rest of these are related to that. Okay, right side must be a subtype of left side. So what I need to do is I pass an IRC message responder into this thing. What I need to do is I need to consume that reference because the parameter is ISO, which means that you can only have one reference to the thing that it refers to. So if we consume it, then we can assign the object to something else. And down here, I also need to stick this in a recover block so that I can get an ISO one of these rather than a ref. Okay, there we go. So just to kind of review what I did here, I now have an interface that defines what you need to have in order to be a message responder, so that users could define their own my IRC message responder, or they could define their own IRC message responder classes. So interfaces in Pony are a form of what's called structural subtyping. And so we didn't actually have to say that this class was a subtype of IRC message responder. It just is a subtype of it because of the fact that we've implemented the method with the same method signature. We could also say explicitly is IRC message responder. You can do things like this so interfaces, in addition to specifying method signatures, you can actually have default implementations. And so if you say that a class is a type of one of these interfaces, it will inherit the default method implementations. But if you don't need the default implementations, then you don't necessarily have to say is interface. So this would be a step towards allowing us to ship kind of a generic IRC bot and say, okay, if you want to add your own behaviors, then you'll add a my IRC message responder, and then at that point it will, and you'll pass that to the constructor, and then everything should work from there. So maybe in the next stream, I'll kind of show how we could start pulling this apart into kind of a library that somebody could use to write their own Twitch bot. Rather than having to write all this code themselves, it would just be something that we could provide and say, okay, as long as you call the following functions and implement the following method, then hey, presto, you've got a Twitch bot. Okay, I think I'm going to close up the stream for today. Thanks everybody for coming by. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good rest of your day.